Asiatic sun. But no pages or squires, not even a solitary warder, were placed by the emblem of feudal power and knightly degree. If its reputation defended it not from insult, it had no other guard. Sir Kenneth cast a melancholy look around him, but suppressing his feelings, entered the hut, making a sign to the Baron of Gilsland to follow. He also cast around a glance of examination, which implied pity, not altogether unmingled with contempt, to which, perhaps, it is nearly akin as it is said to be to love. He then stooped his lofty crest, and entered a lowly hut, which his bulky form seemed almost entirely to fill. The interior of the hut was chiefly occupied by two beds. One was empty, but composed of collected leaves, and spread with an antelope's hide. It seemed, from the articles of armour laid beside it, and from a crucifix of silver, carefully and reverentially disposed at the head, to be the couch of the knight himself. The other contained the invalid, of whom Sir Kenneth had spoken, a strong-built and harsh-featured man, past, as his looks betokened, the middle age of life. His couch was trimmed more softly than his master's, and it was plain that the more courtly garments of the latter, the loose robe in which the knights showed themselves on pacific occasions, and the other little spare articles of dress and adornment, had been applied by Sir Kenneth to the accommodation of his sick domestic. In an outward part of the hut, which was yet within the range of the English baron's eye, a boy, rudely attired with buskins of deer's hide, a blue cap or bonnet, and a doublet, whose original finery was much tarnished, sat on his knees by a chafing dish filled with charcoal, cooking upon a plate of iron the cakes of barley bread, which were then, and still are, a favourite food with the Scottish people. Part of an antelope was suspended against one of the main props of the hut, nor was it difficult to know how it had been procured, for a large stag greyhound, nobler in size and appearance than those even which guarded King Richard's sick bed, lay eyeing the process of baking the cake. The sagacious animal, on their first entrance, uttered a stifled growl, which sounded from his deep chest like distant thunder. But he saw his master, and acknowledged his presence by wagging his tail and couching his head, abstaining from more tumultuous or noisy greeting, as if his noble instinct had taught him the propriety of silence in a sick man's chamber. Besides the couch sat on a cushion, also composed of skins, the Moorish physician of whom Sir Kenneth had spoken, cross-legged after the Eastern fashion. The imperfect light showed little of him, save that the lower part of his face was covered with a long black beard, which descended over his breast, that he wore a high tulpak, a Tartar cap of the lamb's wool, manufactured at Astrakhan, bearing the same dusky colour, and that his ample caftan, or Turkish robe, was also of a darkish hue. Two piercing eyes, which gleamed with unusual lustre, were the only lineaments of his visage that could be discerned amid the darkness in which he was enveloped. The English lord stood silent with a sort of reverential awe, for, notwithstanding the roughness of his general bearing, a scene of distress and poverty, firmly endured without complaint or murmur, would at any time have claimed more reverence from Thomas de Vaux than would all the splendid formalities of a royal presence chamber, unless that presence chamber were King Richard's own. Nothing was for a time heard but the heavy and regular breathings of the invalid, who seemed in profound repose. "He hath not slept for 6 nights before," said Sir Kenneth, "as I am assured by the youth his attendant." "Noble Scot," said Thomas de Vaux, grasping the Scottish knight's hand with a pressure which had more of cordiality than he permitted his words to utter, "this gear must be amended. Your esquire is but too evil fed and looked to." In the latter part of this speech he naturally raised his voice to its usual decided tone. The sick man was disturbed in his slumbers. "My master," he said, murmuring as in a dream. "Noble Sir Kenneth, taste not, to you as to me, the waters of the Clyde cold and refreshing after the brackish springs of Palestine?" "He dreams of his native land, and is happy in his slumbers," whispered Sir Kenneth to De Vaux, but had scarce uttered the words when the physician, arising from the place which he had taken near the couch of the sick, and laying the hand of the patient, whose pulse he had been carefully watching, quietly upon the couch, came to the two knights, and taking them each by the arm, while he intimated to them to remain silent, led them to the front of the hut. "In the name of Issa Ben Marim," he said, "whom we honour as you, though not with the same blinded superstition, disturb not the effect of the blessed medicine on which he hath partaken. To awaken him now is death or deprivation of reason. But return at the hour when the muezzin calls from the minaret to evening prayer in the mosque, and if left undisturbed until then, I promise you this same Frankish soldier shall be able, without prejudice to his health, to hold some brief converse with you on any matter on which either, and especially his master, may have to question him." The knights retreated before the authoritative commands of the leech, who seemed fully to comprehend the importance of the Eastern proverb that the sick chamber of the patient is the kingdom of the physician. They paused, and remained standing together at the door of the hut, Sir Kenneth with the air of one who expected his visitor to say farewell, and De Vaux as if he had something on his mind which prevented him from doing so. The hound, however, had been pressed out of the tent after them, and now thrust his long rough countenance into the hand of his master, as if modestly soliciting some mark of his kindness. He had no sooner received the notice which he desired, in the shape of a kind word and slight caress, than, eager to acknowledge his gratitude and joy for his master's return, he flew off at full speed, galloping in full career and with outstretched tail, here and there, about and around, crossways and endlong, through the decayed huts and the esplanade which we have described, but never transgressing those precincts which his sagacity knew were protected by his master's pennon. After a few gambols of this kind, the dog, coming close up to his master, laid at once aside his frolicsome mood, relapsed into his usual gravity and slowness of gesture and deportment, and looked as if he were ashamed that anything should have moved him to depart so far out of his sober self control. Both knights looked on with pleasure, for Sir Kenneth was justly proud of his noble hound, and the northern English baron was, of course, an admirer of the chase, and a judge of the animal's merits. "A right able dog," he said. "I think, fair sir, King Richard hath not an Allan which may match him, if he be as staunch as he is swift. But let me pray you, speaking in all honour and kindness, have you not heard the proclamation that no one, under the rank of earl, shall keep hunting dogs within King Richard's camp without the royal license, which, I think, Sir Kenneth, hath not been issued to you? I speak as master of the horse." "And I answer as a free Scottish knight," said Kenneth sternly. "For the present I follow the banner of England, but I cannot remember that I have ever subjugated myself to the forest laws of that kingdom, nor have I such respect for them as would incline me to do so. When the trumpet sounds to arms, my foot is in the stirrup as soon as any; when it clangs for the charge, my lance has not been the last laid in the rest. But for my hours of liberty or of idleness, King Richard has no title to bar my recreation." "Nevertheless," said De Vaux, "it is a folly to disobey the King's audience. So, with your good leave, I, as having authority in that matter, will send you a protection for my friend here." "I thank you," said the Scot coldly, "but he knows my allotted quarters, and within these I can protect him myself. And yet," he said, suddenly changing his manner, "this is but a cold return for a well meant kindness. I thank you, my lord, most heartily. The King's equerries or prickers might find Roswal at disadvantage, and do him some injury, which I should not, perhaps, be slow in returning, and so ill might come of it.